Hi everybody, Dan Illman, Matt Bernier. The DRF Bets race of the day for Saturday, January the 27th is the world's richest race, the Grade 1 Pegasus World Cup Invitational, race number 12 at Gulfstream Park. And if you want to bet the Pegasus, if you want to bet that fantastic Saturday Gulfstream card, please sign up to DRF Bets. You'll immediately access a $200 free bet, no deposit required, when you go to drf.com/join and use the promo code FREEBET09. Let's take a look at the field for this year's Pegasus World Cup, and you can get free formulator past performances for this race when you head on over to the Race of the Day event page on drf.com. Download those PPs and handicap along with us as we take this field in post position order. We begin with the number 1 Singing Bullet, 30-1 on the morning line. He will be more at post time.
Yeah, he might be 5 times that, and that's no disrespect. It's just a situation where he's in a no-win spot. I assume from the inside you're going to probably try to establish some sort of position, but you're just not naturally as fast as these other horses. And simply put, you're not nearly as good.
This horse has won 3 times in his career, all wins around 1 turn, beaten at 4-5 and an optional claimer last time out. Bob Baffert won this race last year with Arrogate. He has 2 entered in the 2018 Pegasus World Cup. We'll begin with West Coast. 3rd in the Breeders' Cup Classic last time out. His sort of first start against real older company, real classy older horses, and he ran just fine, just couldn't get to Gun Runner and Collected. He's lightly raced. This will only be start number 10. He draws a very good inside post position, which is kind of a subplot of this race. If you feel that he can improve, and a lot of times these newly turned 4-year-olds do improve, he's right there.
Absolutely. No question about it. And I think there's a real scenario where he works out the Arrogate trip from last year's Pegasus World Cup, where you have the other horses go, the speeds come in, clear over, he sits the pocket. At some point, Javier's going to have to make a bit of a move. I think this horse is capable of doing that. I have to be honest, if this race were run at 10 furlongs, I probably would have picked him. There's just a part of me that thinks that this 1 1/8, this may be the year of West Coast. I'm not sure Saturday's just yet.
I'm expecting Javier to hustle West Coast out of there, not with the intention of getting the lead, but to grab that inside position going into the first turn and save valuable ground, because the horse we're going to talk about, the big favorite, likely horse of the year, Gun Runner, he might get hung out to dry on the first turn. A very good mare. A Champion is next. The number 3, Stellar Wind. This horse, a multiple Grade 1 stakes winner. Now, it didn't work out in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. Is it because she was finally tailing off form, or is it simply a situation where she was just on a deep and tiring rail and she had no chance from where she was positioned on the racetrack?
Yeah, I think certainly she had no chance based on where she was on the track. But at the same time, if you had told me she was on the best part of the track, which would have been 3-4 path, she just didn't run. She didn't pick her feet up. I don't know what the situation was. The Coolmore folks are very, very sharp. We obviously know that. They didn't buy her for this reason, though. They bought her to be a brood mare. At the same time, I think her best at least gives her a chance to crack the number if you're looking for an underneath type. I don't think she can win the race, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if she acquitted herself very nicely for Chad.
She was purchased for $6 million by the Coolmore folks. Now she's with Chad Brown. Here's a positive formulator fact. What else does Chad throw out? 58%, a $4 plus ROI over the past 4 years with older horses making the first start for Chad on dirt. Pretty good. 30-1 on the morning line, maybe a little less than that at post time.
Yeah, I think a little bit of it's going to be sort of the girl power piece, where whether she deserves to be a shorter price than she is on the morning line, that remains to be seen. But again, I think if you're looking for a horse underneath, you could do worse than Stellar Wind.
Pace makes the race. Let's see who our friends at Timeform US believes is going to be on the lead. And we have the 4 Sharpest Tekka and the horse to beat, the number 10 Gun Runner. The red bar indicates this pace will be lively. I agree with that assessment. Sharpest Tekka doesn't necessarily need the lead, but breaking to the inside of Gun Runner, you have to think that his new rider, Arad Ortiz, is going to want to grab forward position and say, Gun Runner, come catch me.
Particularly, not just because Gun Runner is toward the outside, but if you believe that West Coast is arguably the co-second choice in this race, or maybe even the outright second choice, let me at least clear him and make Javier have to make a decision, have to make a move. This horse, there is no denying the brilliance of him. He's incredibly talented. The question is, do you think he can get 9 furlongs?
1:15 Beyer speed figure in his most recent start. That was a 1-turn mile where he had a really nice trip. You said a mouthful. The entire race really kind of boils down to post position for gun runners or work against him, and does Sharpest Tech stay the 9? He stayed a mile and a 16th against way inferior competition. The 9 with gun runner breathing down his neck, he's going to have to work for it.
It's one thing to do it at 8.5 when you're a major league pitcher facing single A minor leaguers. It's another thing when it's an all-star game and you're facing whomever, insert the name, Mike Trout. There's a big difference between that and what he did at Monmouth.
Collected had a gigantic season in 2017. He took down Arrogate in the Grade 1 Pacific Classic with a 115 Beyer speed figure. He ran his eyeballs out in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Gun runner just a little bit better than Collected on that day. Last time out in the San Antonio, we'll first talk about that because I have no idea what happened.
Yeah, I mean, look, that was an unmitigated disaster. No matter how you look at it, Mike Smith has said as much, Bob Baffert has said as much. The horse broke, and he just didn't seem like he was interested in going. But then I almost wonder, and you hear Smith's comments, they kind of figured everyone was going to try to go if he went. And then all of a sudden you're looking at a 46, and they didn't really want that. Instead, they only go 49 to the half. He has no chance to make up the ground. Now, I understand anyone that looks at it and says you have to pass Accelerate. If you're going to run and win a race like the Pegasus, you have to be able to go by Accelerate in the stretch. I'm kind of looking at it from the glass half full as opposed to half empty and saying, you know what, they said all along it was a prep to get here. He was hung wide on a day when I thought Inside did really well. That was opening day at Santa Anita. And if you believe that there is a scenario where he can get back to the Pacific Classic or get back to the Breeders' Cup Classic, he's one of the few in here that can run with Gun Runner. He may not be, I don't think he's as good as Gun Runner, but I think maybe circumstantially he could possibly turn the tables.
The 6 is Gunnavera. We saw that red bar on the Timeform US pace projector. Maybe the early leaders get cooked. You could make the argument that the best pure closer in this race is the 6 Gunnavera. Second in the Travers behind West Coast, coming from all the way at the back of the pack. Okay, 5th in the Breeders' Cup Classic, considering he was down on that deep and tiring inside path in the stretch. And he really likes Gulfstream Park. Do you believe that 109 Beyer from the Breeders' Cup Classic? Do you believe the Breeders' Cup Classic Beyer's speed figure?
Yeah, we've talked about that a lot here in the office this week. I understand anyone that says it is too high. I'm inclined to think that a horse like War Story, who we'll talk to momentarily, just kind of had a day, and we've seen him in the past jump up kind of uncharacteristically. I think that's probably a relatively accurate number. Maybe it's slightly high, but I don't think it's way out of bounds. Gunnavera, if I'm looking for a horse that I think can close and win the race, it's Gunnavera. I'm dubious that he's going to be able to win. I think he can get a piece, though.
If you're skeptical about the Breeders' Cup Classic fig, I think you also have to be skeptical of the Beyer speed figure earned by the 7 Fear the Cowboy in his most recent start, the Grade 3 Harlan's Holiday Stakes. Here in the 105 Beyer speed figure, it was the first time in his 27-race career that he Beyered anything more than a 98.
Yeah.
He beat some nice horses that have run fast races in the past, but those horses haven't come back to acquit themselves very well or as quickly.
No, I think if you're looking at Fear the Cowboy, you're not looking at him from the 105 Beyer. You're looking at him hoping that things heat up front, that he loves Gulfstream Park. Mile and an 8's not a problem, and he's going to come with one run. I don't think he can win. Similar to Gunnavera, I don't think he's quite as talented as Gunnavera. I think he can get a piece.
There are going to be some folks out there that say, if you like West Coast, don't you have to like War Story? West Coast only finished a half length ahead of War Story in the Breeders' Cup Classic, and you're going to get 3 times the price on War Story, a horse that, as you mentioned, occasionally runs big races and outruns his big price. He was 5th in this race last year. I thought he ran just fine. He's just not going to beat the likes of Arrogate. He needs to improve even more, I think, to beat Gun Runner, especially if you're skeptical about the Breeders' Cup fig.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think, too, we talked about it a little bit, I think distance is his friend, and he's not getting enough here. I think he would be better suited at 1.25 miles, 1.5 miles.
Toast of New York is the most fascinating runner in this race, in my opinion. He's 7 years old. His most recent start was his first race off of a 3-year-plus layoff, and he took down a nice synthetic horse in that race, an allowance race at Lingfield over a synthetic horse. That horse came back to win a listed race on the synth. He's only raced once on proper dirt, Toast of New York, and it was a pretty good race. The Breeders' Cup Classic of 2014, where he got beat a nose by Byron. Now, he ran second, chasing the Gate to Wire winner Byron over a very speed-favoring track, but in his one and only dirt start, he went a 113. What are we getting in his second start off a long, long layoff? If he wins, it's the greatest comeback since Lazarus.
If he wins, it's up there with one of the greatest training jobs ever from Jamie Osborne. If he wins, I mean, seriously, you could probably make a case that he's one of the most talented horses we've seen in the past 35 years. Because how can you say that a horse has been gone for 3 years and off of one start comes and wins the richest race in the world against arguably the best horses in the world? That's not supposed to be a recipe for success. Having said that, I think there is a scenario where if he's sharp And we saw that he had some speed back in the day when he ran the Breeders' Cup Classic. If he's sharp at the very least, Frankie Dettori can make life even more miserable for Gun Runner than it already is. If all of a sudden Gun Runner's floated 5-6 path first turn, boy, he's going to have a whale of a time winning this race.
And now the story of the race is the odds-on morning line favorite, the number 10 Gun Runner. What a remarkable 2017, winning 5 of 6, second in the Dubai World Cup, and just a super performance in the Breeders' Cup Classic. He beat 4 of these common foes. He did so while closer to that deep and tiring rail. He just ran a complete race from start to finish. And if you're trying to beat Gun Runner in the Pegasus, are you, again, hoping that circumstance gets him beat more so than one of these other horses that he's already beaten?
Yeah, the way that I look at it is if he had drawn favorably, I would have just thought he was simply going to win. I still think he's probably going to win, but if there's going to be an instance where he doesn't get the job done, it's because of this, because of post position. He's going to be hung wide. He's going to have too much to do. He has done nothing wrong over the past better part of a year and change, almost 2 years now. There's really nothing else to say. He's going to be Horse of the Year. I have no real knocks other than he might get beat because of circumstance.
You scored out on the number 11, Seeking the Soul, last time out in the Grade 1 Clark Handicap. This horse has really put it together in his last few races for Dallas Stewart. The Clark has not come back a very strong race just yet. Maybe it wasn't the best Grade 1 of all time, but this horse is very, very sharp, and 1 1/8 is in his wheelhouse. Maybe he comes running for a piece.
I don't think he's good enough to win, and I think it's debatable if he's good enough to get a piece, but at the same time, I feel like he's the kind of horse you want to look for in 2018. He and West Coast, I think, are the two that I want coming out of this as a whole for 2018.
Gary Stevens should have been arrested for stealing after the Grade 2 San
before.
Antonio last time around. Going 1 1/16, and I know Mike Smith saw it, he thought there was a lot of pace. I don't think you and I, when we were doing the preview, thought there was a lot of pace. We thought Collected would get to the front or just sit second, there'd be no problem. And Giant Expectations, I think Stevens saw the Collected wasn't going, and he was like, well, I'll take it. And then I'll go 49 to the half in a graded stakes race, and a good horse like Giant Expectations, you give him an inch, he'll take 1 mile. I'm not sure 1 1/8 from post 12 at Gulfstream Park with other speeds is exactly what Giant Expectations want, but he's a nice horse.
He is a nice horse. Stevens did it with One Dreamer. Is that who it was in the distaff back in the late 90s, something like that? Anyway, and neither here nor there. This horse, the problem with him, he lost the minute the posts were drawn, whether you thought he had a chance or not. 12 posts, it seems like a damned if you do, damned if you don't position for him.
We have 2 AEs in here. They are entered on the undercard, and we hope they stay there. We don't want any scratches or defections out of the Pegasus. Pick time for the Grade 1 Pegasus World Cup. We both think that Gun Runner is the horse to beat.
Yeah.
But at 4 to 5 from an outside post position, we might try to look for value elsewhere, and I believe we're saying in Bob we trust.
Yeah, basically. I mean, I think there's a real scenario where West Coast is the now horse. I think, I'm hopeful anyway, there's a scenario where Collected, that San Antonio just legitimately draw a line through it, and if you get him back, the way I look at it, if you run the Breeders' Cup Classic over again, the difference is now, okay, if he sits off a Sharp Azteca, and Sharp Azteca can't see out the 1 1/8, now all of a sudden you have Gun Runner chasing you, whereas in the Classic you were chasing Gun Runner. It's an entirely different dynamic. That's my hope. Whether or not it happens, we'll find out.
2 questions. What odds do you need to bet Collected to win? And the second, this race, of course, the anchor leg of the Rainbow Six, pick 5, pick 4. How do you use those bets to your advantage?
So from a win standpoint, I made him 6 to 1. I think I'm going to get that too, because it feels like he's all of a sudden become kind of a very chilly horse in here, where people don't like how bad he ran in that San Antonio. From a multi-race standpoint, I want to have A horses being Collected and Gun Runner, and as B's, I'm going to have Sharp Azteca and West Coast. Because make no mistake about it, there's a real scenario where Sharp Azteca can get 1 1/8. If they're going to get it, it's probably going to be at Gulfstream. If he does, they're all going to have him tied on tight, because there's a real chance that this horse can wire this field.
Single race picks for you are 5, 10, 4, and 2. Mine are 2, 10, 4, and 8. I need at least 5 to 1 to bet West Coast. I think I might get
close.
it. It's going to be very close. From a multiple race standpoint, my A's are Gun Runner and West Coast. My B is Sharp Azteca. It's going to be a sensational race. And if you're betting it from home, here's the deal. $200 free bet, no deposit required. DRF.com/join. Promo code FREEBET09. Collect the $200 free bet and start punching away on Pegasus World Cup Saturday. And it has an approximate post time of 5:35 Eastern. Good luck.